I'm Chris.
I'm Swizz.
And thank you for joining us. We are dealing with the tough questions. Which premium to get? Should I get rid of a 600k player for a guy who's just peaking off a 2-week period? It's big questions, and especially it's big time because there's money to be had and lost. Ladies and gentlemen, round 3 is where everything starts to get real, and everyone realizes it's like that, Boxing Day sale. It's about to end. You got to get in now because otherwise stuff can get real and you can start to lose money real quick while the competition leads away. Chris and Swizz, thank you for joining us. And straight into the backline, I believe, gentlemen. And by backline, I mean make sure you keep us in your back pocket by always subscribe and hit that little ding so that way you're notified every time that we actually release some content. SC Insider 100, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, all the audio platforms, YouTube as well. Like, subscribe, and donate. Give us shouts, whatever. We love a bit of action, especially Chris. Someone's got to pay for the lap dances for the big man.
Thanks, buddy.
It feels so good when you joke.
So I suppose we lead this off just saying there's one player you should be looking at trading in, and most people already know who that is, and that's Daicos. How are you getting him in is the question. The reason why people are looking down to get him in is twofold. First and foremost, he's not playing like that inside mid that moves forward. This role that Daicos currently has is arguably the best role in football. He plays a halfback flanker who pushes up onto the ball, doesn't care about being a defender, and then if he doesn't get the ball, floats back in and takes kickouts because, why not? I just need a little bit more touches. It's ridiculous. Like, it's the most ridiculous Supercoach scoring role I've ever seen. And the team is basically structured around providing that for him because he's obviously such a good user. Now, couple that with the fact that someone tried to tag him and failed miserably. So now coaches are like, okay, so if we're going to tag him and we don't get anything out of that, are we already consigned to losing the game if the tag doesn't work? Where do we sit with it? So now everyone's rushing to get him in. And I personally think he's a must-have. Where are you guys on that?
Oh, you got to get him. Yep.
Oh, and here's the thing. Not only that, the tagging that failed publicly, by the way, with Higley saying, oh, yeah, maybe we'll just give him someone to man up because he doesn't like to man up. It's like, well, hey, maybe you win the ball first and something might happen for you, Higley. For me, it's twofold. Number one, I'd be doing anything I can to get to him, and I'd be taking shortcuts to do it. And the reason is because he is so highly owned now that the hurt factor is real.
Huge.
And before it was, I think about 30% or so. I think it was about 32% when he started out. And then it pretty much jumped, I think, about 12.5% last week after one game. 12.5%. Like, oh, hang on, let's just get on this. Stewart went out and a whole range of other issues. 12.5% jumped on. And now he's already up another 12.5%. So he's gone from 30% to now 57.3% owned and pretty much jumped 25.5% over 2 weeks. That's crazy. And I don't care how I'm doing it. I am not running up against him when everyone owns him. And yes, you can sort of go and try and play against it and I'll back my premium against him, etc. But he is that highly owned that anytime he goes well, you lose.
Yep.
And you lose big, and it's absolutely ridiculous. Now, I don't think he's going to keep averaging, those high numbers, obviously, and there will be a downfall, but he definitely has the role, the skills, and they're looking for him and has the capacity to continue averaging you 100 to 110. And at that point, and at his price where I don't think you'll get him cheaper again, and the high ownership, I think it would be absolutely detrimental to your side, whether you play for overall or in leagues. It would be highly detrimental to your side not to have him in.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, the risk of him dropping a low score is mitigated by the fact that everybody would have him anyway. And the risk is too high to not have him when he goes big. And he's got a huge ceiling. So there's just no point in betting against it. He is the number one correction trade for this week. Whatever you do in your trades, if you do not have Daicos, you plan to get him in first, and then everything else is supplementary to that. That is the rule, in my opinion. I think we would probably all agree with that.
Yep. Every single trade I've been looking at has pretty much been getting him in and then seeing what else I can do.
All right. So outside of that, who are we trading out of the back line?
That's the challenging part. Now, if you have cash in your bank, then it's a bit easier to kind of make some moves in your team. Now, if you already have Darcy Cameron and you have Max Gawn, again, easier because you have options. Now, I've seen a lot of people, Ridley, I've been tempted of just sidewaysing Ridley, a guy, same price, except one of them's just doing better than the other, and it just mitigates that risk. So I reduce my risk by just trading a guy who still might do well, but at least he's not going to hurt me. And I think there's a lot of people jumping off the Ridley train, and I've seen people getting off Doherty. And Chris, I think you had some really good insight on this that you had on your team pod that I listened to.
Oh, thanks, mate. Yeah, I mean, I looked at that and then went, well, I already had Daicos from last week, but the whole point of me getting Doherty in the first place was his run from round 3 onwards, and their run for the next 5 games is absolutely ridiculous. It's why Swizz, it's why you were looking at Cripps. This section is why you want to get on Carlton players, and he's a one that could go on. I think if he averages 110 for the season, which is what I think he averages, this next 5 games he averages 125. You get off him now and plan to get him back at 530k or whatever, it's not going to happen. And you've missed all of his scores, and now what you have him for is probably 105 average. So you missed 5 points per game for the rest of the season. It's just not worth doing that, in my opinion. So I'm not sure. I would 100% stick clear of that. Ridley, for example, I would say, look, if he's the only way to get there feasibly, pull the trigger, because you're going to get a massive points gain on that. Structurally, I preferred going to 3. I'd prefer if you had Ridley at your D2 or whatever, getting Daicos to D3 or whatever it may be is probably how I would prefer it, especially because they've got Saints this week, and Saints give up points to I think he's
Everyone.
going 120 this week. So if he does that and you've just traded out to Daicos, yes, Daicos might go even bigger than that, and that's fine. But you've now missed out on that 120. So personally, I'd only do that as a last resort. Please.
Yeah, I just played around with the idea of moving out Doherty and Ridley to bring in all 3, DC, LDU, Daicos. But then there's a potential there Doherty and Ridley outscore. Well, maybe not as much LDU there, but as maybe a combination, like DC could go back to 105, 110. There's no guarantees he goes as huge as that. And then, and as I said, you could put any of those other guys, LDU or whatever, that where Doherty, we were talking about this run. Why couldn't he go 115, 120, if not more? And Ridley against that, that St Kilda defense, I think we are very much on you need to get Daicos, and I can see the argument, and I've thought about it myself, that Doherty still potentially will drop cash this week, and that with that significant break even, and if you were to move him out and he did have another 80-ish game, yes, that turnaround from going Doherty down to Daicos, make the 100k, and then and obviously probably going to get hopefully points on that. But then the question is, what does that 100k do to you for you? If it's going to be meaningless, well, we've always said that it's not worth it. But if that means you getting Fife and you have some extra cash up to DC or somebody up to LDU or whatever, then that might be the only reason where it's worthwhile. But as you said, we're picking Doherty and the Carlton players for this period, so that's a big jump. So maybe Ridley is probably the one, but if there's other ways to do it, and that's where we were in the mid-price of one going, maybe it is Callahan, maybe it is Hopper, and that especially if he's injured. Yeah, look at other ways to do it outside of trading out premiums.
Now, every year there are these ones like your Horn Francis that people get on and they fall off a cliff, right? And there is the old tread lightly, and then we've had years gone by where Ridley started off really well and people jumped on, and then people watched him, waited another 5 rounds, and he went up another 100,000 and goes, oh crap, now I need to jump on. I'm looking for the Thomas engine, like Thomas the Tank engine. So I think I can, the one that just keeps on keeping on and just keeps trucking. It's there every year. Marshall was a few years ago where you're watching this guy going, wow, he's pulling out some good numbers. And some jump on early and some don't. And then some wait 5 weeks and go, oh crap, now I'm going to pay up and get this guy. So it's in between that sort of zone where if you jump on early enough, right, starting the season or moving to these people early enough and they keep on, then you look genius. If you switch and change and trade your side to go from one Premo to another and go, oh, this one fails, oh, another Premo, this one fails, then it becomes really detrimental and not good for your side at all, right? So I put, Daicos I'm putting aside because I think he's legit, whereas like Luke Davies-Uniacke and also Darcy Cameron are 2 of those that could keep on keeping on. They could both be that top sort of 10 bracket, and LDU with that high ceiling and the good role and how everything's going through him, he is someone that could push that top 10 barrier and just keep on keeping on.
So I suppose that's a really good segue to the midfield spot, and how we view those guys. And I think in the midfield there really is, unfortunately, a huge lack of premium scoring from midfielders right now, which is sort of counterpointed by the fact that we've got some mid prices with these amazing roles that are probably overperforming. And so the guys that went mid price strategy, such as us and some other guys out there that went the two mid prices, maybe even three, or the short midfield, we're looking at structures now where three premium mids was probably the right call. Four
And lots of forwards
Yeah.
and lots of forward
Yeah.
premiums, which was because they were all lighting it up.
So the LDU conversation becomes interesting, because if you're trying to get LDU, how are you fitting him in? Because you can't trade out unless you're trading out, say, a Laird, which I don't think is a viable. I was looking at that last week. Now he comes off a 147. You can't do that now. You're not trading Clary. You're not trading Bont. You're not trading Tom Green. Who are you trading to LDU? The only way is if you say restructuring your side. So you're going from a 4 premium, you've got, say, a McRae, you held on a Kelly, you've got a Steele. These are the guys that I'd say, okay, you have to trade him. You're probably at a 4, or maybe they're your 3. Someone like a Steele, regardless, you've got to trade him. The only option really to me is LDU. Now, roll is king. This is the 4th time I've said that in this series. And we said in the preseason pod that we didn't think that with the trend of midfielders reducing their CBA numbers to play more through the midfield and play more numbers through there, we thought that LDU would be one to drop off, and therefore his scoring would drop off. That has not been the case at all. They're playing him as an 80% or more. I think this week was 88% CBA midfielder.
Huge.
So there's no reason to suggest that his numbers are going to drop below an acceptable standard, which would be, say, 115 is now where I think he's at. Now, you do have to sort of put that into perspective. If he's averaging 115 for the year, he's already had 2 140s. Technically, he's only had 111 for the rest of the season. I actually did the math on this. But 111 for the rest of the season for 550K is pretty amazing anyway. So I would take that and run with it if that's what you're looking to do. But I don't think he's one that you're like, I need to get him over Daicos, or I need to get him in as a POD, or I need to rejig my structure in my entire midfield with all of these other mid prices that are really good value to try and get him in. So is he a must have for me? No. But if you have one of those other 3 guys, so you've got Steele or McRae or Kelly, he's the one that I'd be looking to go to. Ben, what do you think about that?
Yeah, and same reservations with the 2 high scores that he has at the moment. I feel the exact same way with Daicos. But again, the flip side on the high ownership, and I still think he'll average 100 for the rest of the year.
That's
So
the difference, yeah.
yeah, the difference. And I definitely do like him as that option. If I was already 3 deep and he'd be my 4th, I'd probably consider one of those other mid prices to then free up some cash elsewhere.
I think
I
you're
still like
pretty
him though.
frequently 3 deep and maybe even 4.
I'm 3. Yeah, just depends though. Not all the way. Sometimes you get up to here, and other times, like the 3rd or the 4th, you kind of.
That's a visual joke for those playing at home. Switch onto YouTube, you'll see
Wow.
that.
Yeah, it reminds me of Paddington. They call me Knuckles, Knuckles McGee. Is it Knuckles McGee? What do they call him?
Wow, it's got late and
They
all of a
definitely call him
sudden the
Knuckles.
crass comes out.
Welcome,
Apologies.
welcome,
Hey,
welcome to
excuse
Late
me.
Night Supercoach
Excuse
Insider.
me. That is a child's movie reference for which is I don't know if that makes it better.
No, it makes it
On
much,
my
much
end?
worse.
So
Right,
much
okay.
worse.
All right. Swizz, your thoughts on the midfield guys and LDU? I assume that you also think that he's probably the only one that you'd be looking to trade into. And is there anyone else that's caught your eye as well? And
That's literally the only one, and it's the case. I think people who have maybe your Neil McRae, Jack Still definitely have probably
Neil
been
as
a
well is probably one. Yeah.
little bit more blessed with the fact that they can make this potential swap to LDU. If you want to kind of, if you're worried, now I hate trading premiums, but just because of the amount of cash these guys are looking like leaking. But yeah, if you've got an injured player, you've like Gorn or as we've said, or Steele, it's actually kind of worked out with you because you're more forced to trade where we're sitting there talking about, do I really want to upset my team by trading either, say, a Doherty, or I think in your case, say, a Wits, for example, to potentially get one of these guys in? And that's a bigger decision because we know these guys can still go score just as well as and bringing in LDU. So what am I getting by doing the trade? Probably maybe for Doherty to LDU, I'm making it's a cash thing, but with premiums, we don't usually worry about the cash. They're premiums for a reason, and that unless I think Doherty might drop to say 520, and LDU just might keep going and price himself out. There is a world where LDU could go 120 for the season and becomes a must-have. And if you haven't got a hold of him and he's he's priced at 650, 660, I don't know where you go from there. So it works both ways, and there's a risk attached to both. So I'm considering both options, but yeah, I don't think outside of that, there's no other options I'd be looking at.
The thing that's underrated as well, going into the season, we're like, wow, we have such a high amount of, premium mids, and the top 10 was kind of a little bit open once we got out of that 5 or 6, right?
Yep.
So you still got Laird, Oliver. I reckon Neil and Took will definitely bounce back through it. Mills, there's question marks about now. Bont's obviously skyrocketed. So that's still 5 really good players. And then you have 3 more on your field. Maybe Green's already in one of those. Now, McRae's kind of really dropped off. Petrarca's hit and miss. Merritt as well. Brayshaw's definitely dropped off. Hewitt, Cripps, Cripps is going okay, right? But then Parrish is probably the only other one that sort of stands out outside of LDU.
Yeah,
which means that there is actually there's more room now than we thought there was.
Yep.
Which is why I also think it's more of a viable play now because of Mills playing different roles and dropping off, and McRae playing different roles and dropping off, and Petrarca with the more time forward in that variance. Merritt and Parrish are put in a similar boat where one or both could do it or get close enough. Brayshaw, while Freo aren't winning, so we already picked a downturn in his average in the preseason. We said he probably drops a little bit. So that really does leave just LDU.
Yep. Or
to mix it with the 10s.
I mean, the only other one that I actually really, really like, but I'm probably going to hold because he's going to drop a little bit of cash, is Josh Kelly. I loved his game, and I know that obviously people are now really scared off because of the concussion. But that could have been a 150, like easily. Like there's that first quarter could have been 50 points if he halved those contests instead of got 4 clangers in a row. He was on track for an absolute monster score before he got concussed, and I'm waiting for him to be available to be able to trade him in. So I'm hoping like round 5, round 6, he'll be like 550k and I can bring him in. So that's another one, but probably one a little bit later. You did mention Wits, Swizz, so we'll just move on to the ruck line. I think that it's a contentious point at the moment, mainly because driven by one guy. Some people love to call Shrek. Other people like to call the worst Supercoach player of all time, Sean Darcy. For those guys that don't know and don't own Sean Darcy, he scored, I think, in the low 50s after having a -5 at halftime. Was it, guys?
Yep.
And complete roll flip. So his ruck time went down to, I think, just over 50%, with Jackson's coming right up to, I think it was 42%. Maybe even higher than that. I'll have to look to confirm that. They've had a role change and an absolute massive drop off in scores. I would 100% be getting off. I own him for the last 2 seasons, and I hate owning him. I said earlier today in a chat, he is the Zach Butters of the ruck line. And what I mean by that is he cops a knock invariably every single game, and he limps to the finish line. And he'll play through, and he probably plays 20, 21 games a year. But I reckon he's injured in half of them. And he just manages to whatever. Tape it up, she'll be right. And he runs out there and just has games where he just performs absolutely shit. He
looks heavy. He looks like he's carrying a tire with him.
He always looks like that. That's how he's looked. Like that's him. But he can also go 180 on any
and he's
day.
Guaranteed to go like 150, 160 this week if Nick Nat doesn't play.
Right.
100%. He'll rebound with that. But the following week is then same
it's
issue.
It's just like, well, why would you do it to yourself?
And that's where people are looking at going, I don't want to trade him because I know he's going to smash West Coast. Like it's on the cards.
Trade him anyway. Trade him while you got.
He'll still drop cash though, surely.
That's the problem right now. If you don't, it's not about this week because you might miss the most points this week, but he drops cash. You're going to be in the same situation the following week, and you're going to miss out on the chance of either A, going down to DC, or getting English.
And that's
Or
the thing,
wits.
is that
Well,
English is all
wits is as solid
yeah,
as you can get, but yeah, English
yeah.
and
Nah,
DC
English
are fine.
is Wits is serviceable, but English is the standout
It's
if
the
you don't
standout.
have him, and
No, but
DC's the standout forward option for cash point. Yeah, Chris?
I would say that, yeah, except remember when you're trading in English, you're not trading him in just that. You're probably trading
Yeah.
him out at some point too. So,
Hey, if you got Radaglia, that's problem solved then, isn't it? That's why
I
you
mean,
have
Yeah, get the
Radaglia? Is that
14
what you're
depends how
saying,
points
many
Chris?
games he
back up. Yeah,
misses.
yeah.
You can never
They-
you can never tell.
And I know you've
Now-
had this discussion because that's why I have wits, because he's the reliable 22 game 110 ruck that sits there. Now I'm not against still getting DC of that, but because I think and I was toing and froing with that in the preseason as it is. English trading in worries me because I did it last year. He does this, and as you said, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, he's probably going to miss a week concussion. Just what he does, unfortunately, just the way he plays.
I think he looks amazing.
He does look amazing.
Watching English in the first 2 games this year compared to watching English last year, I feel like he is actually better, which to me is quite scary. And I didn't see enough of him preseason, and he had the limping and the rest of it. Now, if you have another bona fide premium, then yeah, I think you're not going to sideways a premium to a premium. You just kind of sit and hope that obviously they're close enough to stack up. Now, we'll go into DC, Chris, because was it Darcy Cameron for the Pies, because you're actually considering something a little bit surprising. I don't know
Yeah, I
if it's
mean, maybe we should
public.
put a
Is it
label on the
public?
front of this. It is, yeah. It's on my check out our YouTube channel where I actually go into detail about what I'm doing and trading out wits. So started with him, and I'm now moving him on. Part of it is structure related, but part of it is the resurgence of Darcy Cameron. So him coming in as a 70-30 ruck split, which is what the current split is at Collingwood, changes things dramatically because he's now the designated number 1 ruck as opposed to a 50-50 split, which was really hurting his scoring ability. And the reason why is because Darcy Cameron doesn't necessarily always score from his taps. Don't get me wrong, he does do that, obviously, but he's not the greatest percentage hit out to advantage ruckman. He gets it from being around the ball, his clearances, his contested possessions, and his contested marks around the ground. That's how he scores.
And tackles.
Yes.
He got tackles.
Yeah. So that is how if he's not around the ball, he's not going to be able to score. Now, the numbers prove that he's actually a viable, say, probably 100 to 105 average player if he gets that 70% ruck time. Now, that puts him, because he's a forward, as a viable forward option at F6, because he's probably in that point and like a top 6 forward. So for me, I was like, okay, well, if that is to continue, and I do believe that it does, especially the way the Pies are playing. If the Pies didn't just dominate the reigning Premier in Port Adelaide back-to-back games, you'd probably be rethinking it. But that gives me confidence to go, okay, they know now the winning setup. They know now what they need to do. It's going to be 70-30 for the remainder of the season, hopefully. So if you can continue that, the worst case scenario is he becomes F6, which is probably what I do eventually anyway, because we've also obviously got now Max Gawn. So Max Gawn owners, went out on 0. They're going to have to trade him out to someone. Is that they can trade to anyone, which is one of the benefits of it, price locking out, of course. So they've got options. But if they go all the way down to, say, DC, they can re-pick up Max Gawn in, say, round 8-ish, round 9, depending on when he gets back and after he drops cash. And Max Gawn, we can then see him for a couple of games, see what his production's like, see what he's about. Could Max Gawn still be R1? We won't know until further on down. But if that's the case, we could pick up R1 for 500k. And if you have English, or if you have Wits, or you have a Sean Darcy or whatever at that point, are you really considering going to, like, at round 8, downgrading to a Max Gawn? Probably not. You're probably just going to ride the gauntlet with whoever you've got. The guys who have DC who can flip him forward all of a sudden get an advantage because now they can put in Max Gawn into their ruck. So it is a play structurally and looking forward into the future to see how that goes. But I really like DC as an option.
Especially if you're playing for league wins as well. When you talk about ceiling, Max Gawn, huge ceiling, DC's very serviceable. So if everyone else has gone like Marshall and English or whatever, then that would be a very viable play to then try and buy you a point of difference against your opponents, particularly at the end of the year. Now, if someone's on English and you get in Gorn cheaply, they're not going to, as you said, trade out, and you probably won't know who wins that until it's kind of too late. So, if Gorn absolutely spuds, then it's like, okay, well, obviously you're in it, you trade him out. If they're going to hold whoever they have, and you're not going to know until, 6 to 8 games later as to like, oh crap, I should have got Gorn, or oh crap, I'm kind of glad I held. And I think that's where the point of different comes in, and it's a different angle when you're trying to pick up people cheaply as far as a premium. It's definitely a viable option to consider.
And
Chris.
obviously, the other consideration is what are you doing with that cash? So you get a 150 if you can get a Daicos. I mean, personally, I'm getting a Warple over a D6, so Constable, playing them on field instead. Like that's a huge upgrade. What are you doing with that extra cash that you can do, and is the points better or less? And in most cases, it's probably going to be better if Darcy Cameron holds. So this is all in the pretext that Darcy Cameron has to be a 100-point player minimum. If he's only going 90, he's not going to be. This whole thing falls to pieces. So it's a pretext that 100 averaging Darcy Cameron is what we get. So yeah, something to think about. But I would, and I suppose for the record, I'd 100% be trading out of Darcy. I don't care who he's got this week. I'm not copying that drop. I'm taking the cash from DC this week, or I'm going up to a English or a Wits. But I'm not copying that with Darcy. I'm out of him.
Not only that, they actually play. So Richmond, so they got Richmond, Brisbane, Saints, Essendon, Adelaide, Sydney, GWS, Carlton, North. So like it's not the huge, like the strongest ruck line. So I mean, I know the Big O can be tough, but he's not nimble around the ground. Nank's not too bad, but sort of same where he can be burnt, on the ground as well and leak some points. Marshall's really good, but again, he gets a lot of his points around the ground. Draper, don't even get me started. Adelaide, hit and miss as to who they use, etc. Sydney, I don't know if Hickey will be back, so it'll probably still be Laddams or whoever else is there. Probably scores really well. GWS as well, not too bad, but definitely get scored against. So I think there's definitely a lot of scope for him to actually continue. And all those teams as well. I think Collingwood actually, when you go through it again, outside of Brisbane, obviously they lose to Brisbane every time of the week. But the other teams there, Saints, Essendon, Adelaide, GWS, Carlton, North, West Coast, like Collingwood's absolutely going on a massive run. And I hate to say it, but it's huge. Chris?
Something to keep note of is two things. First and foremost, Collingwood have completely flipped the way that they've played. They last year they were the 17th contested ball winning side, and this year they're the first so far. And that's coincided with a massive jump in Supercoach scores. They actually now winning much more of the Supercoach pie. Was the last year we didn't have a single player average 100 right, outside of Brody Grundy, which was 6 games. That's completely flipped. They actually were winning 1,900 points the last 2 weeks. Very, very different. And a lot of that is the fact that they're winning a contested ball now. So they're winning the pie, which means there's more points to say a Darcy Cameron, etc. That's one thing. Second of all, we do have to be wary because we do know that Richmond is Mason Cox's bunny side, so he could go 150 and then completely write off Darcy Cameron.
Good thing it's not that time of the year, end of the year. Final thoughts, Wiz?
Yeah, I'm seriously considering DC as well, but for me, it's putting DC in the forward line. I'm more likely to trade Doherty over Wits and run that as a pod versus Chris. If Chris is going to run Doherty, I'm thinking running Wits, and let's see how maybe that plays out. And
one
more
way
because,
to differentiate our teams,
and more because, as you said, long-term structure thinking, Gorn coming in. Mine is, do I really need the extra defender at the moment? If JC and Sheasel both pick up defensive status, is my defense going to be too overflown then? And maybe moving a defender out, yes, cop the fact that I'm going to have, well, it's not even a cop because I'm bringing in Daicos anyway. And then that cash is getting me, up to DC. So that's where my thoughts are at the moment. That could still change, but I'm not losing anything in my structure in the back line and improving by taking, a rookie off field to get, DC on.
And it also does have a flow-on effect as well. If you're already 3 deep in that defensive line, or after this week 3 deep in the defensive line, and you've got, let's say, Jones and Jinby and McKenna and all these other players as well, then how are you getting in Bose next week
That's
to
the
then
other-
only
yeah.
have him play? But then how are you going to have him only play 3 weeks before you get DPP? And then you're like, oh, wonderful. Now I can actually throw all these people back in the defense. Oh, now I'm actually full. It all ties into the same kind of strategy and philosophy in your team. Because if you're going, okay, I've got Jones and you're going to try and trade Jones to someone else because he's not doing well, that makes one thing. But otherwise, I'm going, okay, can I get away with 2 premium defenders still? And then get Bose next week and then be able to bring in a Zeeble into my defense and just take 1 across. And then that'll help me out to allow that swing and flexibility through. So that's what you want to be thinking about between now and next week to at least those options. So that way you don't handcuff yourself or back yourself into a corner and then go, oh, I can do it. But now it's actually not going to be beneficial to my team because I kind of sabotaged myself last week. Chris.
Yeah, so I anticipate, hopefully getting Bose, but let's see how that plays out. And I'm one that does have 3 premium defenders and Zeeble and Sheasel. My plan is only putting 1 back there and then hopefully allowing DC to come forward at that appropriate time. But you got to remember that those rookies in the back line are probably the ones that make the cash the quickest and probably the ones that we trade out first. So if that's the case, I might get rid of a McKenna in, say, round 6, round 7, depending on what the break evens look like. If he's already appreciating cash, then I can just get rid of him early to a premium in another line, and I don't necessarily have to get a defender rookie to cover him. I put a guy back and then reshuffle around and get a forward rookie or a mid rookie instead. So there are other options. You're not restricted with that, and that I'm not worried by that at all. It just adds more flexibility.
Yeah, well, I'm too deep in the defense, but say if it's Doherty out, Daicos in, okay, I'm still in that same structure. But if I was to keep Finn Callahan 1 week and Bose goes really well, that's going to be a straight swap. Callahan's cash that he would make this week would actually, I could get Bose in, and then it's that back line all of a sudden it's like Bose, Jones, and then those other 2 with McKenna and whoever, one of them becomes Zeeble or Sheasel come round 6. So I probably am just looking at that. But it's hard to make a judgment on Bose because what happens if he was to go down? But he's I think everybody's got to think about that, and you're thinking long term structure. So whoever you trade out, and it's much easier if you have an injured player or someone like Darcy, as we've said. But if you're looking at the premium, and a lot of people are talking about Doherty and Ridley, if you're only 1 or 2 deep, maybe have a rethink about that and see where else maybe you're a bit fuller on, and maybe somebody from that line goes instead.
I'm also worried about the rookies coming in because there wasn't much in the preseason, and now we've gone fairly thin in a lot of areas. So I'm hoping someone stands up. Where's the real Slim Shady when you need him? Because we need someone to stand up, and that's everything is null and void until. And I know they always come during the season, but I'm definitely a little bit wary that we might have to hold some people a little bit longer. That wraps us up for all of our segments, and it's definitely a bit of a long-winded one because there's a lot of unpacking. The amount of messages we have received is crazy, asking similar situations, who I should get rid of, look at my team, lots and lots. I don't know about you boys, lots of photos of teams. Like, help me fix this.
Yep.
Or I don't know where to prioritize. So hopefully this has given you some reassurance or some understanding on where you should probably focus your money, focus your attention. Chris?
If people want a guide on like how to get the perfect team, I can just post my team up on the page and then everyone can just trade into that. That's fine.
That's what's been happening anyway.
That's what everybody's doing anyway. So that's literally what's happening.
Well, everyone wants the best format, and a lot of them are looking very similar. So, look, it is what it is.
I suppose when you're ranked in the top 500, what else is there?
What are you, Swizz? Just quickly.
I know my NRL ranking's about 1,200. I think my Supercoach ranking's 5,000 off the top of my head.
Okay, and I'm 1,115, so pretty much not too bad.
It's only because you took the Wits captaincy first week and I led. That's literally the difference between you and I, Benny.
I only want to hear success stories here, Swizz.
What are you, Chris?
Don't give me excuses. Give me results.
500.
Yeah,
exactly.
So Grimo's 100 spots ahead of you. Maybe we'll get Grimo to put his team up. Copy that. Real team.
Yeah, he's like
it's all much and much. Anyway, so that wraps us up, and we all know the real fun does start from here. Once the prices change, once everything gets going, is pretty much where the upgrade starts. So it's not surprising a lot of teams are trying to change to the latest data and change to the teams with winning strategies. And we just have to accept that fact that we are now slightly ahead of where they are because we have already started that way. Anyway, that's it from us. Let us know how you're tracking. Let us know what you are doing. And if you've enjoyed this content as well, Swizz myself will be putting out a team reveal stuff tomorrow night. Do some live, do some other cross sections there and premieres. So do comment, shout, and join. And that's it. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate
Thanks,
you.
guys.